There's one magical, haunted evening each year when all the scary creatures come out to prowl through every neighborhood. But here's the scariest monster of all. Do you know why? This little witch doesn't know it, but she's taking some frightening chances of being hurt. Maybe badly hurt. Her costume is very, very dangerous. Can you see the things that make it dangerous?
Pumpkin Cutter, Pumpkin Scoop, and Pumpkin Light.
Pumpkin Cutter products available at Long's Drugs and Safeway.
Hey everyone, I'm James Matteson, and today I'm back with another review video. Since it's October, one of my favorite times of the year, I thought I would talk about 3 of my favorite slasher movies today. I watched them all recently, and I'm really excited to talk about them all. First one is going to be Pieces, next one is going to be Slumber, Massacre, and then we're gonna finish it off by talking about Sleepaway Camp. And before we really get into things, I thought I would just do a quick rundown of like what my relationship with the slasher genre is. And yeah, I would say overall my thoughts are super positive. Slasher movies are one of my favorite subgenres of horror, if not my favorite, honestly. Some of my favorite slasher movies offer just so much atmosphere and tension through their filmmaking, and I think it's so fascinating to watch and really analyze. And as a whole, I think slasher movies are just really fun. They've definitely got a formula to them, but honestly, I find a lot of slasher movies and their formula specifically to be kind of cozy, like almost like in a comfort food movie kind of way, which is interesting because of how freaky a lot of these movies can be. But honestly, I feel like anytime, anywhere, I can just throw on like a low-budget, trashy 80s slasher movie and have a lot of fun with it. And I would say the 80s slasher movies are really my favorites just in general. I like some more modern slasher movies as well, and I definitely like a lot of like giallo movies, Italian slasher movies from like the 60s and 70s as well. But as far as like American slasher movies go, 80s is definitely my favorite genre. And something about the aesthetic of those movies I just adore. Like I just think combining the slasher formula, as I was saying, with the like 80s low budget aesthetic, it's just really almost like magical. I just love that super grainy film look that pretty much every one of those 80s slasher movies had. And obviously it wasn't necessarily like a creative choice, but I just think that inherent look that those 80s slasher movies all had with the extreme graininess really adds to the atmosphere of them. It's this really interesting thing where obviously the filmmakers might not have even been aware of it, but I think that that 80s aesthetic just adds so much to these movies, and I just love them. And as I said before, I do really honestly appreciate the formula that so many of these movies have, but it's still a formula, you know? Formulas are a bit more interesting when they're tweaked or broken a bit. And that's what all 3 of the movies that I'm going to be discussing today do, actually. They're all slasher movies that tweak or break the slasher formula in some way or another. Alright, yeah, I think that's enough preamble. Let's get into the meat of this thing. Alright, so, Pieces, aka The Night Has a Thousand Screams, is a 1982 slasher movie directed by Juan P.K. Simone. And the plot follows this young college student who is enlisted by the Boston police to help them find this serial killer that is terrorizing the college campus. But describing the plot of Pieces really does not do it justice. On paper, that plot sounds very by the numbers and basic, like you've all probably seen that in many movies 1,000 times. But the way that the story itself is told in Pieces and the way that certain events unfold makes for a genuinely unforgettable experience. This movie adds just so much weird shit around the fringes of it that even though it does have kind of a basic plot on paper, it just is one of the most insane fucking movies I've ever seen. Pieces is this super goofy and super gory B-movie with some of the most joyously weird and odd moments in cinema history. Me just describing some of these moments to you isn't gonna do it justice. If you've seen the film before, you know what I'm talking about, but for those who haven't, I just have to show some clips.
Hey, Miss Riggs!
Kendall?
What happened here?
Well, he jumped me. There he is.
Oh, hey, it's my Kung Fu professor. What's the story, Chow?
Oh, I am out jogging, and next thing I know, I am on ground. Something I eat. Bad chop suey. So long.
Take it easy.
Have you heard the latest? They've just installed a waterbed in the training room.
Have you ever been laid on a waterbed?
The most beautiful thing in the world is smoking pot and fucking on a waterbed at the same time.
You see it?
Yes! While we were out here fumbling with that music, the lousy bastard was in there killing her! Bastard! Bastard!
And don't get the idea that this is some, like, so bad it's good thing either, which is a term and kind of like a, I guess, subgenre of movies that I have a bit of an issue with. I don't know. I just think that that culture of laughing at movies that are a lot of times just so odd and interesting and out there is just inherently kind of problematic to me. But anyway, it's not a so bad it's good movie. This movie is 110% supposed to be super goofy, super funny. They're 100% in on the joke. One of my favorite comedic aspects of the film is the fact that it introduces not one, but two of the most obvious red herrings of all time. The movie just really revels in how not seriously it's taking itself. And I love how just completely over the top and cartoonish the actors who are playing these red herring roles just play them. I have some history with this movie that I'll get into a little bit. This was one of the first, like, very trashy B movies that I ever saw. I saw it when I was, I think, I want to say 11th grade, high school definitely. And I had never seen anything like it. And I immediately kind of got obsessed with the zaniness of it and started just like quoting the movie to like my friends and people I knew, and of course they hadn't seen the thing, so I probably seemed like a crazy person. But yeah, this movie really proved to me that there's a bunch of really interesting, really unique stuff out there. I just have to find it. And you know, as much as I love Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, not all horror is that. And like I said, yeah, this movie just really showed me that horror can be more than that and be so much more unique and singular and zany and weird. And yeah, to get into the movie a bit more, it's just a fantastic Giallo-esque slasher. I say Giallo-esque obviously because the movie isn't literally Italian. It can't be a Giallo, but it is very similar to those movies in a lot of ways, especially the murder mystery aspect of it. There are so many great moments of tension in this thing, so many incredibly well put together shots. Visually, it's just really well done. In particular, I love the POV shot that they do during the aerobics kill. I think that sequence does a fantastic job of really just extending the tension as far as it can go. And this movie has so many great moments of just gore and gore effects if you're into that in your horror movies. And the way that these effects are handled in the movie are just super over the top and cartoony in the movie, which I love. It perfectly fits the tone of it. This movie also happens to fall into one of my favorite subgenres, I guess you could call it, which is movies that feel like they're capturing the feeling of being in a dream or being in a nightmare. As someone who is genuinely really fascinated in the science of dreaming and like why people dream. I love when movies can capture that feeling and vibe perfectly. I mean, some examples are Eraserhead, one of my all-time favorite movies, that captures the feeling of being in a really fucking bizarre nightmare perfectly. As well as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre has that vibe of a really fucked up nightmare, just perfectly. And this movie definitely has that as well. So many moments are just so nonsensical and bizarre. It really does feel like a very strange and freaky dream that you're having. The movie is definitely very plotty at times, which basically just means that it focuses the most on the plot rather than the characters or the vibes of it. I feel like I describe some slasher movies as either being plotty or being vibey. With vibey basically just meaning that the movie is more preoccupied with kind of just hanging out with its characters, developing the world of it, focusing on the scary elements of it, rather than having like any like strict plot or like arcs or anything like that. The other two movies that I'm going to talk about are definitely much more vibey, which I personally prefer, but I think that the plottiness of this movie never really gets in the way of what it's trying to do. It still achieves the weird nightmare vision that it's trying to go for. Yeah, I think that's about it for this one. This movie has absolutely perfect fall/Halloween vibes. So if you're planning on watching it soon, definitely try and watch it in October for sure. And I definitely don't want to spoil it for those who haven't seen the movie. Definitely go watch it, I'm recommending it. But this movie definitely has one of my very, very favorite endings and final shots in just any horror movie, not even just slashers, just any horror movie in general. Alright, so the Slumber Party Massacre is a 1982 slasher movie directed by Amy Holden Jones. This one is another one of my absolute favorites. I had a blast rewatching this a couple weeks ago. And the way this one tweaks the slasher movie formula right off the bat is that it injects very palpable feminist and coming-of-age movie themes, as well as featuring some really well-done, goofy, tongue-in-cheek humor. And all those things are definitely really interesting to have in a trashy slasher movie like this. For some more context, this movie was actually written by Rita Mae Brown, who is a feminist author and activist. And fascinatingly, this movie was actually originally conceived by her as a straight-up parody of slasher movies. And after the script was written, the producers of the movie changed the script so that it was more of a straightforward slasher movie. And on its face, that decision really seems like a crappy one. I'm a big supporter of just letting artists get to do whatever the hell they want. I always get sad when I hear a story like this of studio interference, producers and corporate bigwigs kind of taking the project away from a creative. But honestly, despite that, I think this movie actually hits like a pretty perfect middle point. It's goofy, it's funny, and it definitely borders on satire at points, but it doesn't go so far in that you still can't take it seriously as a horror movie and as a slasher movie. To discuss the feminist allegory of the film a bit more, the killer is of course supposed to be representative of the patriarchy, which is made clear by his phallic weapon of choice, a drill. The allegory itself is definitely simple and it's a bit surface level honestly, but it still is super effective and it totally works in the context of this trashy 90-minute slasher movie. A detail I love in particular, and I think adds so much to it, is the fact that the killer doesn't wear like a creepy, typical slasher movie mask. It's just his face. And the movie doesn't really choose to necessarily obscure it in darkness or shadows or anything either. It's just like his actual face. Which to me is a really compelling choice because honestly, to many, many women across the globe, that image of just a man's face is scary enough. No creepy mask needed. And I really love the coming of age angle of it as well. This is essentially a movie about young women realizing the horrors of existing as a woman in modern society. A moment I love in particular that really hammers this home is towards the start we see what is essentially our main character of the movie, Trish, throwing out this box of childhood toys that she has, including this Barbie doll. Later in the movie, we see that the killer has destroyed this Barbie doll and kind of left it out for her to see as a way to taunt her. And like I said, this movie isn't necessarily saying anything revolutionary, but it's really awesome to see a trashy B-movie like this just tackle some genuinely pretty deep themes and do it really well. Like I was saying earlier, Pieces was more plotty, while this movie is much more vibey. The movie doesn't really have much in way of a plot, and instead it's just kind of about showing our female protagonists all kind of hanging out, while the movie builds tension and scares in the background. Before the super scary stuff starts happening, it's honestly a super fun vibe. It's just fun to watch these characters interact and to watch them mess around. They all have a ton of chemistry together and personality as well, and it just honestly is a blast to watch. So yeah, that's about it. I truly do not have enough good things to say about Slumber Massacre. One of my favorite horror movies of all time. It's fantastic. Everyone should go watch it. Sleepaway Camp is a 1983 slasher movie directed by Robert Hiltzik. Similarly to Pieces, on paper the plot of this movie is incredibly basic and incredibly simple, but it has so many moments of personality and over-the-top strangeness that it really doesn't matter at all. For example, some of the very earliest scenes of the movie feature the main character's very strange mother. Like seriously, this might be one of the most heightened performances I think I've ever seen on film. It's fantastic.
Look what I did. I packed you and your cousin some goodies for the ride up to camp. Wasn't that nice of me?
Any chips?
Why, of course. I believe there's a whole bag. Why, I'm almost sure of it. Angela, isn't there anything special my little girl would care for?
Another example is the character of this pedophile head chef who works at the sleepaway camp, who really loves to talk about it with his coworkers for whatever reason.
Hey, look at all that young, fresh chicken. Where I come from, we call them baldies. Makes your mouth water, don't it?
Artie, they're too young to even understand what's on your mind.
Then, good buddy, there ain't no such thing as being too young. You're just too old.
And similar to Slumber Massacre, actually, this movie also features some great coming-of-age themes as well. The main character of this movie is this very socially awkward, quiet young girl who is clearly having trouble finding her identity. And the movie explores these themes in a very heightened, very trashy way that only a B-movie like this could really pull off. This main character of Angela is clearly an outsider who doesn't really fit in, and this really brings this element of relatability to the movie that is not really found in slashers usually. To analyze the horror elements of the movie a bit, I just think this is a really effective slasher. Like the two previous ones I discussed, it builds tension in an incredibly effective way. It has a great atmosphere to it. This is more of a summery atmosphere rather than a Halloween or a fall one, but I still watched this in the fall. I loved it. The actual kills in the movie are very simple, but that's definitely not a bad thing. There's a definite bluntness to them, which is really interesting. A lot of the times you only really get to see the aftermath of the kill. And all in all, I think it's really effective. This movie doesn't really feel the need to have like insane gore effects to really sell itself to its audience. And similarly to Slumber Massacre again, actually, this is much more of a hangout movie than something like Pieces is. The plot of it is just very thin and flimsy, which is not a bad thing at all. The movie is mostly just about watching these kids hang out and have a good time, while the movie kind of builds itself up and builds tension in the background of this summer camp. In particular, I love the baseball scene in the movie, and I also love the butt prank scene. I think that these are just really fun moments that have a lot of personality to them, and the actors and the characters in turn have so much chemistry together. I would not be surprised if the kids of this movie were like actually friends, or they actually like made them hang out before they shot the movie. So yeah, I have gone this entire video without mentioning the very obvious elephant in the room, so I guess I should touch on that now. So I don't want to necessarily spoil the ending of the movie for anyone who hasn't seen it, but the end of this movie does feature this twist/reveal that many have accused of being transphobic over the years. I don't personally really feel qualified to discuss my thoughts on that controversy here, just because I'm obviously a cis white guy. I don't really know if I would add anything to that discussion that really needs to be heard necessarily, but I'll just say this. I find the ending of the movie to be incredibly disturbing and incredibly freaky, in a way that the movie hadn't really been up until that point. I think up until that point, the movie is a very fun, very goofy 80s slasher, but the rest of the movie doesn't really feature anything that genuinely gets under my skin. The ending of this movie genuinely gets under my skin in a way that very few movies ever have. It is just truly nightmarish, and just discussing the horror elements of that twist, I think it is monumentously effective. But yeah, man, I think that's about it. I adore all three of these movies, three of my very favorite slasher and just horror movies in general. It was really fun to discuss all of the crazy, wacky elements of all of these movies, and to really get to compare and contrast the similarities and differences between all of them, as well as how all of them just really tweak the slasher formula. All of these movies definitely have that formula in place, but the way that they tell their stories, they just are able to add so much weird and odd and freaky details to it that just makes it feel so singular and so unique. Yeah, I mean, what more can I say? All three of these are fantastic. If you haven't watched them, please check it out. I think all of them are available on Tubi, free with ads. I mean, amazing streaming service if you want to watch trashy B movies. They have a genuinely awesome selection on there. And no, I'm not sponsored, I just genuinely really love their selection of movies. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am going to keep doing some movie reviews in the future, some more music reviews as well. And yeah, that's about it. Bye.
Tonight has been a magical night. We saw a scary monster changed into a beautiful, happy, and safe little princess. How about you? Will you follow the lead of the little princess and have a safe and super Halloween this year?
Happy Halloween from KFDA.